The last time the Land Cruiser was around, it had a starting price of over $85,000, and that's before this little known thing called inflation. If sold today, it would be over $100,000, which means it was simply unattainable for most people, which is why Toyota only sold about 3,700 units. But this Land Cruiser starts at $55,000, and last year they sold nearly 10 times that amount, and it wasn't even for sale for the entire year. So by making the Land Cruiser more attainable, Toyota gets to 10x sales for the Land Cruiser, and it's not like they got rid of that model. It's still available. It's just sold under the Lexus mark, which, by the way, they got to double sales of the Lexus LX in doing that. But for every Land Cruiser that Toyota sold, they lost about one 4Runner. So this thing is clearly attainable. People want it, but it is a confusing model. But what's not confusing is the way that this thing looks, because it looks awesome, it looks rugged, it looks really cool, and it's meant to be off-roading. You could tell just by looking at this front bumper. This front bumper kind of looks like a bunch of Lego pieces put together, because there's something like 9 or 10 pieces for this front bumper, and that's intentional, because if you accidentally break something when you're off-roading, like for example this or this, you don't have to replace the entire front bumper, just one individual part. And even over here on the side, this little part of the bumper sticks out to prevent you from scraping your fender. Now, if we move over to the side, we have some other cool things going on, because we have power folding mirrors in this car, as you can see here. But the cool thing is, even though they're power folding, you can still manually fold them in. So if you're out on the trail and you accidentally hit a branch, you're not going to break them by accidentally pushing them in. Overall, this thing is just fantastic. It's meant for off-roading first, passenger car second. I mean, even the way that these tires are designed, they're meant to stick out and protect your wheels from being damaged on the trail. And of course, you have the shape of the cutout exhaust, which is also designed to maximize departure angle. Now let's talk about the powertrain, because the Land Cruiser lost 4 cylinders, but it gained a turbo and an electric motor, because this thing is now a hybrid. And although it is a hybrid, you might be expecting incredible fuel economy, and although it's rated for up to 25 miles per gallon, I've only been getting around 18 miles per gallon, so it's not exactly a fuel sipper. Plus, this thing only takes premium fuel, so any expected savings from gas is kind of canceled out with the more expensive fuel. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be skeptical about this turbocharged 4-cylinder hybrid setup, but I'm going to be on the camp of let's give this thing a try. Toyota knows what they're doing, they make reliable vehicles, and I think they can make this thing work, and we should definitely give it a try. However, the one thing you can't escape with this car is the noise. This thing just does not sound good, and unfortunately it sounds like it's working really hard even under basic acceleration, and that's where I think this hybrid setup could use a little bit of refinement. The electric motor in this car is only rated for about 50 horsepower, which isn't really all that powerful. It's not powerful enough to get this car moving at decent speeds on electric power only, which means the engine has to kick in, and because this car weighs 5,000 pounds, the engine has to kick in and spool up the turbo, and it sounds noisy, and it's just not all that great. I do think that if this thing were to get a more powerful electric motor, 100 horsepower, maybe 150 horsepower, and it can supplement that kind of low-end acceleration and keep the engine from having to work so hard to get this thing moving, we could see some pretty good results from this hybrid setup, but I do think it's going to take a little bit of refinement. Let's get this thing turned around because of the sun. Now, moving over to the back, we have a pretty awesome design. I mean, I love the way this thing looks. We got the blacked out Land Cruiser logo, the classic Toyota font over here. This car has no Toyota badges on it. I do think this kind of iForce Max branding is a little excessive, and the tow hitch on this car is not exactly my favorite looking thing. Now, when it comes to accessing the cargo area, you do have this button that opens up the window, which is kind of nice. However, this is a big car, and I mean, I can barely kind of reach over this thing. My girlfriend probably isn't going to be able to successfully get anything out of this car by using the back window, but it is there if you can utilize it. Probably kind of a useful thing to get in there. Now, when it comes to cargo area, this is where things kind of fall short because this is a hybrid. Unfortunately, you have this incredibly high floor, which is because this is where the battery lives for this hybrid system. Unfortunately, it also means that you don't get a third row in this car, unlike the GX and the 4Runner, which have that third row option. However, it's kind of interesting because on the inside, we have the remnants of a third row. You got cup holders in here, third row USB ports, and even third row ceiling vents, which is just kind of weird for this car, but it is what it is. And not to mention, we also got some other weird things going on, like this cover over here. This little cover over here is rated for a 60 kilogram limit, so basically 130 pounds. It feels really flimsy, so if you're loading heavy items in here, like a grill or maybe a cooler, there is a chance that you could break it, so that is kind of something weird for this car. Now, I do think though that the hybrid solution for this kind of off-roading vehicle is still a great solution, but the problem is the battery. Where do you put the battery? With the battery in the trunk, you kind of have limited storage capacity and you can't really have access to a third row. And even if you put the battery under the second row, you're still probably not going to have access to the third row or be able to fold up that second row. Now, here's the solution I suggest. Go with the FJ Cruiser style. Take the spare tire that's underneath the car, taking up a bunch of space, and mount it on the back of the car, just like the FJ Cruiser. It allows you to have a full-size spare, and you could put the battery where the kind of spare tire is taking space lower in the car, giving you more cargo capacity, allowing for a third row, and I really think that is a good solution that Toyota could do to make this a successful hybrid off-roading vehicle. Now, moving on to the second row, this is what you're working with the seats folded up. This is your storage area. You do have a little bit of a dip over here because this is, of course, the hybrid battery setup. However, I just noticed there is a little bit of storage under here, which is kind of a nice little thing to have. It's not significant, but it is there. Now, folding these seats down, to kind of just talk about passenger space, it's not exactly the easiest thing to do, but there it is. When it comes to passenger comfort in the back, it's okay. I have a decent amount of room back here. I've got a reasonable amount of leg room. Got a decent amount of headroom, even though this is the car option with the sunroof, and it's relatively comfortable. The only complaint I have is you have this relatively large transmission tunnel in the middle, and that the floor is pretty high, so I don't exactly have the greatest amount of thigh support. But when it comes to things like amenities, I have my own climate controls, USB-C ports, and even roof-mounted AC vents, which is kind of a nice little thing, so it's pretty decently comfortable back here. A couple of other things to mention back here is that you have these one-touch power windows, which surprisingly open all the way down, even though this is a huge window, even in this dip section. And then of course you have your grab handles when you go off-roading. You also got your cup holder back here. And another cool thing is that you have a decent amount of reclinability back here. Not the greatest, but hey, at least you got something. Now moving on to the front, we have these kind of cool looking brown leather seats that are perforated, they're heated and ventilated, which is nice. And on the driver's side, it adds lumbar support and of course, this kind of extended thigh support, which I think is kind of nice. I've been utilizing that as well. Moving on to this, you have a grab handle for both you and your passenger, which is nice, and a 14 speaker JBL sound system, which sounds okay. It's not the best in the world, but it is decent. Now, of course, this is the fully loaded model, which I forgot to mention. We have a heated steering wheel and dual 12.3 inch displays. Now, I will say for the gauge cluster, it is a little weird that this is a hybrid vehicle, but there's no hybrid representation whatsoever. You can't see when this car is doing regenerative braking, and you can't see what the battery life is, which is just kind of a little bit weird. Now, when it comes to the infotainment system, I will say the maps are a little laggy. I mean, it's usable, but it's not the smoothest thing in the world, as you can see. But you do get wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, which is to be expected. Moving on here, we have a digital rear view mirror, which is kind of nice. And of course, we have a little moon roof on the top. Moving down here, we have, which I really appreciate, physical buttons for your climate control, which is great. You got 3 USB-C ports, a wireless charger, which could be a little better placed. I mean, it doesn't exactly show the greatest amount of support if you're off-roading at least. And then you have all of your off-roading controls. You got your crawl control, your drive mode selector, and then of course you got your center and rear locking diffs, your anti-sway bar disconnect, and because this is full-time four-wheel drive, you got your high 4 and low 4 options. Now, moving on to the center console area, you have one of the tiniest center consoles I've ever seen, because this also acts as a cool box, which is cool and all, but it would be even cooler if there was just more storage back here. I don't know if exactly most people are going to be using this. It's just kind of a gimmick, but hey, it's there. Storage capacity is limited in this car, which is kind of a thing to consider. I mean, even this glove box isn't exactly the biggest on storage, so that is kind of a thing. But again, this is an off-road first vehicle, kind of passenger car second, so that is kind of what you're working with. All right, time to drive the Toyota Land Cruiser. And unfortunately, I didn't get to do any off-roading with this vehicle because it's been raining for the last week and all of the truck trails, at least the truck trails that I know, have been closed. So that is a bit unfortunate, but it is very easy to see that this is an off-roading truck. When it comes to the ride quality of this thing, it drives like a truck. It's very rugged. It's very not comfortable, I'll give you that. If you're looking for this thing as a family vehicle, that is something to keep in mind. This thing is meant to be an off-roading vehicle, and you can tell even when you're driving it around town, just like how you can tell like a Civic Type R or a very sporty vehicle is meant to be a sports car and not a sort of daily driving vehicle. So that is kind of something to keep in mind. Also, when it comes to other things, you have kind of relatively loud wind noise for this car. Unfortunately, Toyota didn't really do a good job at kind of isolating the wind noise in this vehicle. There's a lot of things contributing to the wind noise in this car. For example, you have this relatively boxy shape. You also have the lack of any acoustic glass to kind of block that noise. And then you have things like the kind of squarish side mirrors and just, you know, even the windshield wipers, they're not fully tucked underneath the hood of the car. So it's just relatively a loud vehicle to be in. And then of course, you also have to deal with the engine, which is unfortunately a 4-cylinder that just doesn't sound all that good. And the disappointment with this engine is not really the power. I mean, this thing is reasonably powerful. It's just the engine has to try very hard in order to get this thing moving, because it is a 4-cylinder engine that's moving a big 5,000-pound vehicle. And in order to do that, it needs to spool up the turbo. So even driving around town under light acceleration, the engine needs to be kind of pushing at least 2,000 RPM to get in that power band. And this is unfortunately where I think the hybrid setup could be improved and refined with this car. Unfortunately, the hybrid motor, or the electric motor in this car, only has about 48 horsepower. And I think if Toyota were to improve that to say 100 or 150 horsepower, that could be a nice improvement and sort of kind of soften the sound of the 4-cylinder engine. I don't think the 4-cylinder engine is the problem with this car. I think it's the lack of the more powerful electric motor. Plus, with a more powerful electric motor, you can kind of better capitalize on things like regenerative braking, which, let's face it, a 50 horsepower electric motor isn't going to be doing all that much when it comes to regenerative braking in this car. Another great thing about this car is it does have Toyota's Safety Sense 3.0, and that's actually one thing I really appreciate about Toyotas is that they're pretty much standard across the board. So this Toyota Land Cruiser has pretty much the same capabilities as the 2025 Toyota Camry, and it's great. It does a good job at centering within the lane. It is a little too safe at times, specifically when it comes to cross-traffic monitoring, and it's kind of like gives you a panic attack when you're at a light and you're trying to make a right turn on red. But that is, you know, a nice little safety feature to have. So yeah, I mean, this thing is awesome. It drives okay. It's not going to be as luxurious as the GX because it doesn't have the kind of acoustic glass that that car has. But I mean, just kind of be aware that this thing is a truck. It drives like a truck. It doesn't have the best ride quality in the world. But if you want a vehicle that can be very capable off-road, well, here you have it. So that's the new Land Cruiser, and regardless of what the Land Cruiser enthusiasts say, I think this does a decent job at honoring that legacy of this car. And most importantly, this thing is attainable and it's more affordable than it used to be, which I think is a great option. However, it is certainly confusing because Toyota already sells an off-road capable SUV with the same platform and the same powertrain, so it certainly is confusing. And in that sense, I do think it would be great if Toyota offered a way to differentiate this vehicle from the 4Runner, and an easy way to do that would be to give this the same twin-turbo V6 that's found in the Lexus GX. Let me know what you think. Would you rather have this, a 4Runner, or a Lexus GX? With that being said, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Toyota for loaning me the Land Cruiser for a week. Let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure you subscribe, like, and comment. Do all the good stuff that's free, and thank you so much for watching.